Domestic abuse is an underreported and often hidden crime. It is estimated that 1 in 5 women will experience domestic abuse in her lifetime, and that women from all social classes, age groups, ethnicities, religions and marital status are affected. When domestic abuse is mentioned, people automatically think of physical abuse, as this is the most visible signs of violence. However, domestic abuse includes a range of different types and patterns of behaviour. It involves the use of coercion, fear and intimidation by the perpetrator in an attempt to control their partner or ex-partner in an intimate relationship. Although physical violence may be used, a relationship does not need to include physical violence for it to be considered abusive. The description and brief examples I am about to give you are all real-life experiences taken from the book No Visible Wounds: Identifying Non-Physical Abuse of Women by Their Men by Mary Susan Miller. Non-physical abuse is described as including psychological abuse, which is undermining the victim's logic and reasoning. An example is when a husband phones home asking his wife to carry out a range of tasks. When he comes home in the evening and she tells him she's carried out these tasks, he denies phoning home and asking her to do them in the first place. Social abuse is imposed isolation from family and friends. Examples vary and are people locked in the house, women locked out of their homes, an example of which was one woman who took her sister's birthday present and stayed for coffee and cake and was locked out of her home. Quite often they'll hide car keys or even prevent their wife from taking a job. Emotional abuse is undermining the victim's self-respect and sense of self-worth by name-calling, insults, public embarrassment and accusations. Examples are one husband came home late from work, and when his wife went to reheat his dinner, he told her that he didn't eat slop and told her to feed it to the dogs and eat it along with them. They'll often hurl obscenities at their wife in front of the children, and the abuser will attack things that they know are important to the women. For example, they'll threaten or actually punish the children. One man wouldn't allow his children to wear seat belts when he took them out in the car to increase his wife's anxiety. Another tortured and teased 4 kittens before killing them. Another set fire to the dog's tail, cigarette burns in furniture and cutting up their wife's favourite dress. Economic abuse is imposed economic dependence on the abuser, where deliberately inadequate amounts of money are left to meet the most basic needs. The woman often resorts to stealing or borrowing. An example of this was when one woman was told that she was too sick to continue to work. Her doctor advised her to give up her job, but her husband refused to allow her to do this. Finally, she collapsed at work and was forced into giving up. Her husband reacted to this by throwing her down a flight of stairs. Sexual abuse, although primarily a physical form of abuse involving forced or coerced sex, it can also be exercised in a non-physical manner by controlling safe sex practices or restricting access to contraception. An example is research carried out by Davila and Brackley in 1999 found that women in a women's shelter reported that if they asked their partner to use condoms, this would result in physical abuse, as it was perceived to be a breach of trust in either the partner's or the woman's fidelity. The effects of non-physical abuse can be detrimental to women's health. This can include anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, passivity, learned helplessness, low self-esteem, low self-worth and self-belief, as well as sexually transmitted infections and unwanted pregnancies. Periods where women are at greater risk of domestic abuse exist. These include during pregnancy or following the birth of a child, and when planning to or just after leaving an abusive relationship. There are many barriers to leaving an abusive relationship. The most commonly reported factors influencing the leaving process involve fear, economic insecurity and children. children. Having been threatened by her abuser as to what he will do if she tries to leave, the woman becomes fearful that he will act on these threats. One husband threatened to hunt his wife down and kill her and the children. A woman who has been denied access to the family finances has no resources to sustain her even in the short term. This means she cannot arrange alternative accommodation or perhaps even afford public transport to allow her to get away from her abuser. Children can be both a barrier and a facilitator to leaving an abusive relationship. Mothers are often in turmoil as to how to respond to domestic abuse, as on the one hand, they want to protect their children from the negative effects of domestic abuse, and on the other hand, they want to keep their family together and avoid exposing them to any potential instability. The debilitating effects associated with non-physical abuse impact on the victim's ability to leave the relationship. These are reportedly similar to tactics used against hostages and prisoners of war. The victim may also become dependent on their abuser as a survival mechanism. This is termed traumatic bonding. Finally, many victims report non-physical abuse as worse and as having more devastating effects than any physical injuries, but they also feel they must cope with their experiences in isolation, as no one will understand or they won't be believed.